For 70 years, from 1947 up to 2014, you fed me one narrative in the school textbooks.
Dwarka. Is this a figment of our imagination?
For the longest time, we've come to accept the fact that it is part of our mythology. And we didn't really bother to explore whether it was part of our mythology or was it part of our belief system or was it actually part of our history. The rigor that should be applied to many of the subjects in our country, we have not given them the sort of resources and time and attention that we should have. There are people who will say that Ashwin Sanghi has lived up to his name, Sanghi. The relationship between Lakshmi Saraswati, always remember it, that Lakshmi is interested in going wherever Saraswati goes. So if Saraswati is in this room right now, Lakshmi wants to be in this room.
Are gods also factual, or are they just an interpretation of something that we want to believe? Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Before I Became Me, a series where we actually explore what people were before they became famous. And today I am joined by somebody very special. I started reading much of Indian history because of the way he used to talk about Indian history and how he's narrated it in the sort of kahanis that he has. Whether it's Krishna's key, whether it is the vault of Vishnu, whether it is the Rozabal line, which speaks about, of course, a very different issue. He is the reason why a lot of people have started paying more attention to India per se. It gives me great pleasure to be able to welcome on the show none other than Ashwin Sanghi.
Thank you, Rishabh. That is so sweet of you. And what a lovely introduction. I hope that I can do justice to the introduction you've given me.
No, thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time. And like I said, this is in order to capture your journey before you became the Ashwin Sanghi that we know today. Tell me, what was your life like as a 16-year-old?
As a 16-year-old, probably it was very unlike what most people would imagine. I'm a South Bombay boy. My father is from Jodhpur. My mother is from Kanpur. Both of them, after marriage, shifted to Bombay probably sometime around 1961 or something.
Okay.
I was born 1969. And growing up years were basically cathedral school, very, very cosmopolitan upbringing and education. We were well off, but we weren't rich, but we never lacked for anything.
Right.
I still remember, for example, that we would all sit and have breakfast together before we left for school. My brother and my sister and myself, all of us used to go in the same car to the school. There would be a crisp 1 rupee note on the breakfast table, which was our tuck money, as it were, which could get you probably a cold drink and a packet of chips. So those were simpler times in that sense.
Right.
And of course, the focus was on not just education, but also on our extracurriculars. So, for example, all of us were encouraged to take up an instrument.
Right.
In my case, I took up the tabla. My brother learned the sitar. My sister took up Hindustani classical singing. So all of that was there. We were encouraged to read.
Right.
That comes particularly from my mother's side of the family, and mom in her, herself always loved reading, and she would pass on whatever book she had read. We will talk a little later about the influence of my grandfather.
Okay.
From my maternal side, which was where my love for books comes from.
So the voracious reader in you is because of
Is because of him. But so it was a very, very normal upbringing in that sense. But the one thing that was always constant was that you are from a Marwari Banya background, and you will be going into the world of business. And so it's very important to prepare yourself for that world. So For example, I don't recall having summer vacations. Summer vacations basically implied that, okay, what is the project that you can take up? Sometimes, for example, father would say, okay, so and so factory, now you go and be an apprentice for the next 2 months there. Or he would say, there is one of our automobile workshops. So you go there and you work on a restoration project along with this particular gentleman for the next 6 weeks. Or go to the office and learn under so and so the fundamentals of bookkeeping. So it was any holiday, extended period of time
Was an internship.
was basically an internship. And I think he was coming from the place where, I think he had seen very, very tough times, very difficult times, and he wanted that his kids should be capable of holding their own.
So was the internship like, I'm sorry to say this, but now Nepo children, as they are called, was the internship where it used to be something where you were given a position of, leadership, or was it right at the bottom of the pyramid?
No. And the question didn't arise because we were at ages. I mean, for example, I remember walking into my father's office when I was probably about maybe 13, 12 or 13, and being taught how to do ledger posting, or how to do billing. So it was very, very junior level stuff that one was doing.
Right.
For example, we had one Munimji in my father's office. He was the oldest accountant.
Okay.
And he himself was from, I think, Jodhpur or Jaipur. He used to wear a kala coat and a topi. And he would, get very upset with me in case I did the ledger posting without underlining the account head. Because those were the non-computer days as they were,
Correct,
right?
correct.
Or for example, how to ensure that you can check a trial balance without having to check every entry. So, in that sense, the grounding was very solid. Uh, and in parallel to all of this confusion that was going on was dear old Nanaji, who lived in Kanpur. And he was not my real Nanaji. He was my real Nanaji's elder brother.
Okay.
So we used to call him Majle Nanaji.
Okay.
He was the middle brother amongst three. And he used to run a very flourishing textile business in Uttar Pradesh. But what was remarkable about him was that he never let go of his passion for reading, writing, and the rest of it. So he was multilingual. He besides the usual Hindi and English, he could speak and write in Persian and Urdu and I think Latin, and probably a couple of other languages. He had a massive collection of books.
Right.
His library, I think, had thousands of books. As a result of which, he was not just one of those who did casual reading.
Right.
He genuinely knew about the world, and you talk to him on any subject, whether it was history or geography or economics or politics, and he always had a view that was a very seasoned view based on his own understanding of multiple sources.
So that's where you got your reading gene from, is it?
Yeah, so he would always, there was a very, very intimate connection between him and me. And he had this wonderful habit of sending me a book every week, almost every week, sometimes 2 weeks. But the idea was basically that he would lovingly actually not just send any book, but pick up a book based upon what I had already read and say, "Beta, isko padho because I think this will add to your to your understanding of the world in some ways."
Right.
So, I mean, if we really think about it, for example, it was Nanaji who exposed me to Autobiography of a Yogi. Probably I must have received it when I was 15 or 16, but it was several years before I could actually
Fully.
fully appreciate the title. Or, for example, at a younger age, the Mahabharat retold by Raja Gopalchari. Or, for example, Freedom at Midnight by Dominique Lapierre. Um, or, for example, War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. So there were multiple titles, and he was not ashamed of exposing me to all.
Thoughts.
So Lolita by Nabokov came to me probably before I turned 18.
Okay.
So it was a wide range of books. During his lifetime, I think he has definitely shared probably more than 300 books with me.
What was the impression of Lolita to a young adolescent boy growing up in South Bombay in Cathedral?
Probably not too much, given the fact that it came after Lady Chatterley's Lover. So that had already happened. So, there was an innate playfulness about the old man where he said, listen, you don't need to straight jacketed and just allow the exposure to happen in a natural way. The thing about this was that in parallel, of course, my father was still trying to train me for business. And when I would go to the office, Munimji would see that I'm holding one of the books that Nanaji has given me. Because whatever was the latest book, I would be keen to be sort of devouring it, as it were. And Nanaji not only required me to read it, but he needed me to send him a letter. तो क्या पढ़ा,
क्या सीखा,
वो उसमें से उसका निचोड़ क्या है, and did you like it or dislike it? If you liked it, why did you like it? If you disliked it, why did you dislike it? He wanted actually the earliest form of a big book review, probably in an A4 format. And he required that letter to come for the supply of books to keep coming. It was like, okay, तुम चिट्ठी भेजो और मैं अगली किताब भेजता हूँ.
Tell me, growing up in an environment where before you turned 18, you've read everything from Dostoevsky to to Lolita, to all of these kind of books.
Yes.
And then that would have been very different from even people who are in Cathedral, because not everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how did that shape you
But in terms of what it did in terms of my output at Cathedral, it was not very remarkable. I didn't realize that there was any rewiring going on. My life I was an average student at Cathedral. It wasn't as if because of Nanaji's books, I suddenly became above average.
Right.
There were some subjects that I still struggled in. And not only that, but even in terms of my writing, I remember we had our English professor, Professor Elisha, in the 10th standard, and he called me in front of the class and he said, this last essay of yours, Mr. Sanghi, do you realize that you use commas and periods like you're sprinkling salt and pepper? And he said, don't you dare ever do that again. And so it wasn't as if my writing quality was great, but I think it was opening. He was rewiring me, and he was rewiring me at a pace where I didn't even realize it. It was like the frog in the water, where he doesn't realize the subtle change of temperature that is happening.
Because reading an autobiography of a yogi at the age of 15 and then reading some of
Yeah,
these
but
classics.
a lot of that reading was not necessarily understanding or appreciating.
Sure, of course not.
So, and there were titles which he sent me where I would go back to him and say, look, I've tried, but I can't. War and Peace was one of those. In parallel, as I mentioned, when I would be going to the office, and Munimji would say, why are you wasting your time?
धंधा सीखो.
हाँ, ये सब क्या है? And Ashwin Babu, अगर आपको कुछ करना है, तो focus on the bookkeeping, not on the book reading. And then that was a conflict.
And how did you deal with this conflict, given the fact that your father wanted you to always
So,
join the family business?
on the one hand, there was my mom. My mom was unlike my Majle Nanaji, where she loved reading, but she only wanted to read paperbacks. So whatever happened to be the latest Jeffrey Archer or Irving Wallace or Frederick Forsyth or Ken Follett of those times, or later probably the John Grishams and Dan Browns and what have you, she would read them and she would pass them on. So on the one hand, it wasn't as if I was only doing meaningful reading. I was also utterly exposed to the world of entertaining reading, which probably explains the sort of writing that I do, which is that it has to be mass market. It has to be in some ways entertaining before it can be in any way enriching or educating,
But a lot of people, including me, have found your entertaining books then leading us deeper into academic subjects, which we normally would not have touched upon
Probably.
had the entertainment not been there.
Not been there. So for me, things like, for example, when I would go back to Nanaji and say, Nanaji, okay, this is now what Munimji is saying. So he would say that, beta, look, you are from a business family. So it is taken for granted that your objective in life, your ultimate objective will be in some ways artha. Because that is in your DNA.
But artha should serve your dharma.
But he said that, so अगर तुम दिवाली को बैठोगे तो तुम लक्ष्मी जी की पूजा दिवाली के दिन करोगे. That is part of your culture and what have you. He said, but Lakshmi ji, what is the process by which you attain Lakshmi? He said, I have seen so many families which had lots of wealth, but they went down the tube because they didn't have wisdom. So he said the relationship between Lakshmi Saraswati, always remember it, that Lakshmi is interested in going wherever Saraswati goes. So if Saraswati is in this room right now, Lakshmi wants to be in this room. And if Saraswati gets up, then Lakshmi is curious, ki why has Saraswati got up? So he said, ultimately, if you go after Saraswati, Lakshmi will come to you as a byproduct. And that was a wonderful way of being able to explain that to me, that how to in some ways conflict, to resolve that conflict, that mental conflict in my mind. And of course, the joke that I narrate to a lot of students when I go for all these sessions is, I said that if you really look at our Hindu pantheon, then the only god that can sit between Lakshmi Saraswati is Ganesh, which probably explains why I look the way I do.
But a Ganesh in that form is what everybody wants to be.
Everyone wants to be. So, but actually, Nanaji used to say that, beta, live your life like Ganesh. So, in that sense, I think, if you ask me what sort of a childhood, I would say a very, very unusual childhood. Because all the education, background, everything was very ordinary.
Not ordinary, but you studied at cathedral and schools like that. So, I mean, ordinary in the sense that, yes.
Ordinary by South Mumbai standards. Yes. And, but at the same time, very unusual, because I was reading stuff that no one else was reading, and I was getting exposed to business and at an age where no one else was getting that sort of exposure.
And I'm so glad that you mentioned that you were given books such as the Mahabharata or autobiography of a yogi at a very nascent age. The thing is that most of our curriculum, being a South Bombay boy myself, most of our curriculum and books essentially lead us to reading about Tolstoy more and Shakespeare more. So automatically the normal progression of thought is that you will go to Machiavelli, you will go to all of that.
Absolutely.
But you won't necessarily tread the Indian path.
That's right.
Therefore, if there is not too many voracious readers at home, then you may not get the exposure of the East per se.
Yes.
And therefore, Tao of Physics is a book that I chanced upon very much later in life.
Yes.
So this definitely has its advantages.
Oh, yes.
But we come from South Bombay, and I fully understand the privilege that we come from, and
Oh, yeah.
therefore we have the opportunity to do these kind of readings at such a nascent age.
Correct.
Otherwise, most are fending for themselves,
Correct.
perhaps, and their families. So this definitely led to you becoming Ganesh in a way. But at the same point in time, you did an MBA from Yale University. Was this your father's dream, or was this something that you did out of choice? And is the business part of you something that you have to do because it comes naturally? Of course, I come from a business family, so I'm also told the same thing. So is it because of families? Is it because the family is telling you, or is it something that drives you in a way as well?
See, what happened actually was that we as a family and as a business were going through very, very challenging times. When I completed my cathedral school stint in the 10th standard, that was, I think, 1985 or something. Then I was in St. Xavier's College through my junior college and senior college years. So 5 years I was at Xavier's. And those were very challenging times. And what my father and mother said at that time was that, even if for some reason the business doesn't work, and for some reason you need to be employed, you need to be able to do that. And in those days, an MBA from an Ivy League was treated very differently to now. Today, everyone and his cousin has an MBA.
Correct.
In those days, it wasn't that common. There was still a sort of a uniqueness to it. So father's view at that time was very clear. He said, "Okay, beta, listen, you finished your graduation. Now, once you start getting into work, I'm not too sure as to then whether I will be able to provide you with a year or two to be able to take a course of any sort. So, jo bhi karna hai, you do it immediately after college." Now, in those days, one is the American university system was not used to the 15-year routine. So they, in any case, felt that your education is incomplete by having done a 10 plus 2 plus 3. And the second part of it was that if you looked at most of the top institutions there, the average age of the class typically was around late 20s, early 30s, which meant that you'd already spent a few years before you actually came in for an MBA. So I was fighting those two real issues. So what happened was I said, okay, let me just focus myself on cracking the GMAT. Because जो भी होगा वो बाद में देखेंगे, पहले तो ये sort out करो. So during my final year at Xavier's, besides a sort of I was doing a major in economics. So besides studying for my economics major, I devoted a lot of my time to just sort of attempting to crack the GMAT. And I was lucky because I landed up with a 750, which was in the top 1 percentile of the GMAT scores. So I thought to myself, I said, okay, fine, this hopefully makes it easier. But the sort of colleges that I was applying to, I didn't realize that their view was, this is one part of it, but हमको बहुत और चीजें देखने की जरूरत है. So at that time, then my father told me, he said, if there are a few institutions which have given you a deferred admission, then why don't you go for a week and request them for a personal interview, so that they are able to understand that even though you may be very young and emerging as a fresh graduate, but they cannot understand the concept that you've been exposed to the world of business from the time that you were 12 or 13. So why don't you try and do that? And so I went for a week to the US and I interviewed with a few of the universities. And then finally Yale, which was one of those that had given me a deferred, accepted me in.
How lovely.
So
Yes.
I think it worked out. But honestly, Rishabh, now I feel that I had my family and I attached too much value to it, because now at age 57, 58, and the way my life took a turn, I realized that, hey,
Was it necessary?
was it really necessary? At that time, it was life and death.
Correct.
It felt like life and death. No, no, and all of us young kids, we've all been through
Of course.
those moments where we considered that this is life-changing moment. If this doesn't happen, my life is pretty much screwed. But you realize much later that the options were all there in front of you.
So do you think we focus too much on the degree and the university whilst we are in
Of
school,
course.
and also in the young adult age per se, and the fact that when we see it eventually, it's not a well educated mind as much as a well formed mind that essentially one should work towards. Is that something that is your conclusion on the subject area, or do you think that
I guess it's easier for me to say that having gone through Cathedral and Xavier's and Yale. So it's easier for me to sit here and expound that it was so unnecessary. I do believe that a certain modicum of education is necessary in order to teach you how to think. But beyond that, does formal education, I use the word advisedly under quotes, does it actually educate you? I'm not so sure. I believe that the vast majority of my education happened outside the classroom. It happened outside school, from the books that Nanaji gave me, from the experiences I had at work, from the failures I had in life. All of those were far greater points of education than the years that I spent in the classrooms.
And this is something that I've heard from so very many people, that the formal education system sometimes does not teach you as much as life experiences do.
Oh, yeah.
And perhaps failures teach you much more than success does.
Oh, big
And
time.
because you've been a regular attendee at IMAN in terms of motivating the children and speaking to them over the years. So I feel it comfortable to ask you, saying, would you mind narrating a few failures, especially as a young adult, that you had, that you think would benefit viewers?
I've had not one, many. And I have no shame in terms of talking about them. But to give you an example, when I came back after completing my MBA, I was deputed to one of our industrial gas plants. And that was an old plant that had been imported from Europe some 15 odd years ago. And the fundamental economics of the plant itself were flawed, because when you're talking about things like industrial gases, the greatest raw material is power consumption. And if your power consumption is off, you can kill yourself, but you're not going to be able to compete effectively in the market. But at that time, I had all sorts of, bright-eyed bush. You've got a bushy tail, and you think, no, I can fix it. You want to take that challenge. As a result of which, I think maybe sort of was banging my head against a stone wall for almost about 2 years, trying to turn it around. Whereas later on, I realized that maybe I just needed to understand the basic economics of that particular operation and say, listen, this is not going to work, no matter what I do. Or, for example, many years later, one part of our family's business has also been automobiles. If you consider the name Sanghi, it's always been associated with automobiles. So I remember 98, 99, that was the sort of turning point of the dot-com era. The dot-coms were coming into the business, and I thought that we could have a great opportunity to start looking at multi-brand retail of automobiles using the internet. But it was an idea which was far ahead of its time.
She's going to say.
So I thought that it should be possible to have a virtual showroom and do this and do that. I also brought in the investors who were equally happy to go along, but it eventually resulted in .gone, .com to .gone, which was about 2 years later when I realized it's not working. Even if I think in terms of my writing career, the Rozabal line is a book that has been loved by you.
Yes.
And there are many people who swear by that book. They say that the only reason that we appreciate Ashwin's writing is because of that book. But that book, I mean, I started writing it around 2002, 2003, but it was completed in 2005, but it could not get published till 2008. And between those 2 or 3 years, almost around 47 literary agents and publishers said no to me. That, thank you, but no thank you. And many of them actually came back with some productive advice saying that, if you want to make this publishable, this is what you need to do. And I said, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm happy to keep the manuscript the way it is. So again, now in hindsight, probably I could have accelerated the process of going to publication by taking on some of their suggestions, but I was simply too stubborn. And now looking back, I feel that I was right because that book is appreciated primarily because it did not get changed. And it was written the way it was written.
And therefore, sometimes to hold your ground is the most important thing that one should learn.
But there isn't a formula.
But Ashwin, again, in your case,
Because, Rishabh, does it mean that you should simply stand your ground every time? Does it mean that you should take other people's advice? Should you take advice every time? So what is the formula here?
there is no one.
There isn't.
But even in your case, it would have been perhaps easier in order to say, look, it's fine if my book doesn't get published in the immediate year or 2 years, but I will hold my own and I will wait for the right time. But for a person who, say, for example, starting off writing and does not have any other secondary source of income, at that juncture, they may be compelled to take in some of these suggestions for the lack of other opportunities that they have at their disposal. So, like you said, that there is no one set formula.
There isn't a one set formula, but in any case, for all those who go into the world of writing, my advice is that you should not write when you are hungry. It's damn difficult. Those ideas, those notions that all poets were miserable and all poets were hungry. Frankly, today try and implement that, and you'll realize what the implications are. So, family comes first, income comes along with it, security, financial security comes along with it. So, writing is something that you can do at any time. The Rozabal line was written when I was working full time. And I was dealing with many, many crisis situations at work. But I would still come home, I would have my dinner, and typically by around 10 o'clock, I would retreat into my study. And then I would spend maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours between 10 and 12 to work on my research and my writing. And so, आस्ते आस्ते करके 2-2.5 साल में वो किताब लिख ली मैंने. The same applied even with Chanakya's chant. The only difference was that second book I wrote in the mornings, typically getting up at 5, working from 5 o'clock to 7:30, and then putting in a full day of work. So our common mutual friend Amish wrote Immortals of Meluha in the Gadi.
Correct.
So it doesn't matter. This is something that you can do any time of the day. You don't need to compromise on your primary income source in order to. So the way at least I would approach it, that first see whether it's like almost sort of sitting at the pool and putting your feet in. And once you feel a little comfortable, then go waist deep and then eventually lagao the dubki. You don't need to jump in.
And enter from the shallow side of the pool and then go to the deep one.
Exactly.
Don't be the miserable poet necessarily.
Absolutely.
Because the primary source of income, as I kind of realized after writing books, you get 8% royalty and things like that. And even if you sell how many number of books that you have, if you have to look after a family, take responsibility.
It's impossible. See, today, for example, okay, The largest publisher in this country last year published 400 titles. That's a little more than a title a day. What would be the average print run of those titles? Probably anywhere between 2,000 to 5,000 copies.
Correct.
Right? Even if you consider that the average cover price was, let us say, hypothetically 500 rupees,
Which is also on the higher side.
which is on the higher side.
Correct.
But even then, the top line of that title is only 10 lakhs or 20 lakhs. So, how much royalty are you going to get out of that if you are at a 10% slab? So, the reality of publishing in India is that unless and until you can start getting to the higher price points, and with that higher price point, you can get into the print runs which run into lakhs. Then at that point of time, your royalties begin to look interesting. And then hopefully along the way, also allied income from things like, for example, audio adaptations and OTT and film and web and whatever. Then the entire pie begins to look interesting at that point of time.
Correct.
But it's going to take you a long time to get there. So, I mean, the old joke is that writers can write books faster than publishers can write checks. So, why not wait it out? Why not wait it out? Do your writing. Don't stop that, but keep your income flowing.
Keep your income flowing. And like you said, Lakshmi and Saraswati and the example of that. And therefore keep the academic pursuit there. But at the same point in time, focus on the Artha also. Otherwise, your Swadharma will be in one area and your
Absolutely.
Artha, then you won't have any Artha to support the Swadharma that you have.
Absolutely.
So, no, what you said is very true. But the other gremlin that young authors face, and I face this personally because I'm one to, perhaps it's the baggage of being born in South Bombay, saying I don't want to take help from anybody in terms of connecting and reaching out to people. So as a first-time debut author, I wrote to all the publishers without any sifarish, so to say. And of course, having gone through the process yourself, you know how difficult and tedious it can be. And nobody wrote back. So then I decided saying, look, you know what, we have IMON, we have the non-profit, it's in different schools. Let me publish by myself and let me, do the distribution. Then, of course, subsequently, the other books have then gotten picked up and so on and so forth. But when I reflect back on that decision, and when you were narrating your story, a lot of people would think, saying, should you wait for a few more years and get a Harper or a Penguin to publish, or one of the more prominent publishers to publish, or is it okay to self-publish? What is your thought on this?
See, at the time when I started out, which was, I finished writing the book in 2005, went into the market in 2005, and then couldn't get published up to 2007. 2.5 years had already gone by. At that time, self-publishing didn't, as a platform, it was not robust. In fact, in India, no one was talking about self-publishing. The Amazon Kindle as we know it did not exist. It was late 2008 by the time the Kindle became available. And that too, it was a clunky model of the Kindle. So what did exist in 2007 was EPUB, ebooks, which then you could possibly read on your computer. But in 2007, the first few self-publishing ventures got kicked off in the US.
Okay.
And what they allowed you to do was to access retail and distribution without having to make an upfront investment the way vanity publishing required you to do. See, the way you have to think about this is three possible arms. There's the traditional publishing route, which is, let's say, Penguin, Harper, Westland, Rupa, what have you, where you sign a contract, they take on the financial risk of it, they probably pay you an advance, and then they also share a certain royalty with you. Marketing costs are to be borne by them.
Correct.
So as such, all that you do is really do the job of writing and then eventually also play the role of an ambassador for the title. In those days, in India particularly, if you didn't get that first route, then your only other route was vanity publishing. Vanity publishing meant that you went to an outfit and then the outfit said, okay, fine, we will print it and also put it into the stores, but you will be picking up the first print run, which meant, in other words, you were paying for the first 2,000 or 5,000 copies, which was a large investment
Correct.
that you were making upfront. Now, self publishing emerged as an alternative to that in 2007 and 8, where some companies said, okay, fine, you know what? Uh, the web has now taken off. If you write a document, you can simply upload that document to us. At that time, they didn't have the ability to deliver it electronically to Kindle because Kindle didn't exist. But what they could do was transform that into a printed copy of a book. So one of the first few companies was a company called Lulu in the US, where you simply uploaded your PDF and they would typeset it for you. And you could upload your own cover. And then your book, by paying $99, you could buy the ISBN number for the book and take your copyright for the title. In addition, they would make sure that it got listed on all the electronic platforms like Barnes and Nobles, WH Smith, Amazon, all of the places where books were normally available electronically.
Right.
And if you noticed in the listing, it would say one in stock, more on the way. Now, the idea of that was basically that at any given point of time, they would actually genuinely only be printing one book at a time. So if Rishabh went on Amazon and clicked on buy, basically an order would get triggered and it would land up in Lulu's place. Lulu would print a copy and dispatch it to you. So effectively, it implied that there was no need to actually have the vanity press run.
Correct.
You didn't need to print 2,000 or 5,000 copies. You could print one copy at a time.
Correct.
So that is how the Rozabal line was originally published by me in 2007.
Okay.
Now, after publishing it in 2007, I realized that, okay, fine, I've done this. But at that time, there were no platforms available in India. So Amazon hadn't come to India. So if my book was listed on Amazon, it was only Amazon US, Amazon UK, Amazon Canada, and what have you. So I said, how do I sell this book in India? So that's the time when I started knocking on the doors of bookstores and saying, will you keep my book? I've already published it. Now, what the bookstores told me was something very interesting. They said, see, you are an unknown author, unknown title, and in any case, as business model, we don't deal with authors, we deal with distributors. So you need a distributor. So one of my friends who was in the textbook business and had known me for a few years, I reached out to him and I said, listen, can you distribute this? I'll buy 50 or 100 copies from Lulu, bring them in, and then I'll give them to you. And he said, look, this is not my space, but I will share with you a list of some 50, 70 distributors who work in the space of fiction and trade paperbacks and all of that. What I would suggest is you send them a copy of your book along with a letter and see whether one of them clicks. So by then, I had already tried the traditional publishing route in India. It had not worked. So I said, okay, let me try the distribution route. So I sent them all a copy of the book along with a letter. None of them replied to me because it was irrelevant. No, I'm sure they must be receiving 20 a day. One of them got back to me, and that was a small company based out of Chennai called East West.
Okay.
And East West was one of the largest distributors for imported books in South. East West had at that time just entered into an arrangement along with the Tatas to set up a chain of retail stores called Landmark. And Landmark, in turn, had entered into an arrangement of sorts to set up a small publishing outfit called Westland.
Okay.
I'm talking now 2008.
Correct.
So the founder of Landmark, a lady called Hemu Ramaiya, she reached out to me and she said, Ashwin, story is interesting, but you have priced this book at $16.99 in the US on Amazon. If you bring this book into India, and then we have to add 100% margins for retail and distribution, no one's going to buy this title. So she said, why have you not published it in India? And frankly, Rishabh, I wanted to get up and I wanted to punch the wall. That, do you realize the agony I've been through in the last 3-4 years trying to get this published?
Of course.
Right? So she said, listen, what I can do is I will pass it on to the CEO of our new outfit called Westland.
That's how you.
And his name is Gautam Padmanabhan. So she sent the copy to Gautam. Gautam got back to me about a week later and he said, Ashwin, I am not sure whether this will work or not. He said, can you source 10 more copies for me so that I can give it to a target group
For reading.
to read and then to come back with their feedback? I said, sure. I got the copies. I sent it to him. And now see, this is how life plays games. One of those 10 readers was his own father, who was Senior Padmanabhan was known as being like the doyen of this industry because he had created, he was genuinely passionate about books. So he went back to his son a couple of days later and said, don't waste your time trying to get feedback from the other 8 or 9. I'm telling you, you need to publish this. And that's how Gautam then came back to me and said that, listen, I'm willing to sign an agreement with you. And my first royalty was 25,000 rupees.
Wow.
So
In 2008.
In 2008.
Oh, that's really an accomplishment for a first-time author to get that much amount. When the total royalty right now comes up to, for very many, that much. This is quite an interesting story that you just narrated about your first experience.
And the Rozabal line, when it came out in India in 2008, October it was published. And by then, of course, I had already for the last 18 months been trying to market it in the US. So I had been doing what is known as Indian Jugaad, sending it out to magazines, reviewers, saying, listen, I'll send you a free copy. Please post your review on Amazon. I had created my own trailer for the book. I was pushing the YouTube and I was doing everything. I was hitting out across the board to try and see that it works. And then the title came out in 2008. And for the first time, mainstream media was actually sort of going to be interested in reviewing it. And the very first review that had to come out, fortunately or unfortunately, was the Hindu's literary review. And I remember being so nervous because by then I had received such blowback. One reviewer in the US had said that Ashwin Sanghi has written a good book, but it could have been a little shorter. Maybe he should have considered stopping on page 10. So, this is the nature of what you do creatively, right, Rishabh? There is always going to be someone who likes what you do, but there are going to be also an adequate number of people who will pull you down.
Absolutely.
So I was nervous as hell. And, the Hindu literary review is one of those, in those days at least, 70 or 80% of the reviews were basically to say, hey, listen, this doesn't cut it. So I was waiting and here I am based in Bombay. This paper is published out of Chennai. So I told Gautam, I said, you are in Chennai. So the moment it comes, please fax me a copy. Those were the good old days where we still had fax machines. I said, fax me a copy of of the review. And so by around 9 o'clock or so, he sent it to me. And I was keeping my fingers and my arms and my legs and everything crossed while I was looking at the machine. And it was almost a quarter-page review, and written by someone called Pradeep Sebastian, who was one of their very well-established reviewers. And he said that we do a great disservice to Ashwin Sanghi by comparing him to Dan Brown, because Ashwin Sanghi is so much more. And then he went on to write, I don't know how many paragraphs, explaining why the Rozabal line had broken all boundaries and was sort of something worth your time. Absolutely. And I said, there is someone who's actually saying something nice about this title.
Because there's so very many nice things about the title,
but as a writer, you are always going to
be skeptical in the
You're always skeptical. But then again, learning part of it, Rishabh, is that very often you think, oh, now this great review has appeared, so my book is made. And then you realize that book reviews don't sell books.
It's not at all.
So after a month was over, or a couple of months were over, Gautam was looking rather worried as to whether we'll have a second print run or not. We had published about, I think, 3,000 copies. That's the time that I told him, I said, would it work in case I started doing the rounds of the stores? And so I went out on a Bharat Yatra of sorts. And whether it was Bombay and Delhi and Calcutta and Bangalore and Hyderabad and Pune and all. And in every city, I would visit 10, 15 stores. Try and either meet the owner or otherwise meet the manager. And, in my head, I only had one formula. Jo dikta hai, wo bikta hai. So the book should be in front. So I would say, listen, how many copies do you have? Then I would talk about the story, why it is important that story should work. And the mere fact that I would take out that 10 minutes to talk to the guy who was actually doing the selling on the floor
would
made such a huge difference, because now he had a personal connect with the writer of that book. So what would have normally been in one corner of the bookstore came out onto the main shelves. And that's the time when, again, momentum picked up and we went into a second print run. And then, by the way, after that, we never stopped printing. We went, it was, I think, 3,000, then the next one was 5,000, then the next one was 8,000.
Wow.
Then after that, we started, almost, it became like clockwork, 5,000 aur nikal lo, 5,000 aur nikal lo. And before we realized it, we'd crossed a couple of lakhs already.
But the marketing of a book is so very important. I have observed this. And you spoke about Amish as well, and he keeps mentioning this, saying it's not just writing a great book, but it's how you market the book that is more important than perhaps the literature sometimes in the book.
Yeah.
Of course, the content has to be good, but there are so many books whose content is great, but they're sitting on the shelf.
There are many great stories, Rishabh, which have been written and have not moved from manuscript to published because someone gave up.
And therefore, so it's very important in order to remain committed to the process. Like you were committed to the process till you met Westland, and the whole thing happened. And there are so many people who give up halfway, saying, but now it's that the self-publishing route is something that you think for people who are not getting an answer from the traditional publisher. Is that a route that they should explore?
So the way to think about this is that now, of course, self-publishing has established itself.
Correct.
And you have so many different ways of being able to consume that story, whether it's in print or whether it is in an ebook form or whether it's on your Kindle or whether it's Audible, and so many other methodologies are available in terms of getting the story out. I would say that probably if you are going the traditional route, your chances of getting the manuscript read are higher when you work through an agent rather than reaching out on your own. Because the publishing houses get bombarded with manuscripts, and they have a huge, what they call a slush pile of unread manuscripts. So now the point is, you may have a great manuscript, but when will it get read? It could be a couple of years by the time it gets read. So that is where in traditional publishing, if you have an agent and an agent who believes in you and your story, then the chances of him or her being able to pick up the phone and speak to the commissioning editor of that particular genre and say, listen, I think you really need to read Rishabh's story. That becomes highly probable and it improves your chances of getting read. Does it improve your chances of getting published? I'm not so sure, but at least that foot in the door happens as a result of the agent. So that is number one. That if you are going to go down the traditional route, I feel you have a better shot at it with an agent, even though it implies that out of your royalty check, the agent will be taking some 10-20% off the top. The second part of it is vanity in any case is an out. Why would you go down that road? Unless you happen to be, let's say, a corporate and were taking out a book which is 100 years of XYZ company, and you already knew that I'm in any case, my own internal consumption is going to be 5,000 copies. So then that's a different matter. Self-publishing is a little bit like being on Indian Idol. So you have a great voice, you sing very well, you've knocked the doors, but those doors are not opening. So you need a platform so that you can. The biggest issue in all industries is what I call discoverability. How do you get discovered? In the old days, we had very few opportunities to get discovered. Now, self-publishing allows you that opportunity to put it out there. But remember one thing, self-publishing sells a lot of books. Okay, so probably several million every year. But the tail is very long. It's a long tail. So in other words, the self-publishing industry makes its money by having lots of titles, but not having great throughput per title. A few years ago, the statistic was that the average self-published title will sell 57 copies during its lifetime. The number may have changed now, but at that point of time, it was about roughly 57 or 58. And I can bet you the vast majority of that 57 would be the author himself, or maybe the author's family or immediate circle or what have you. So, what self-publishing allows you to do is get the title out there and be discovered. So now in the event that, let's say you're a 50 Shades of Grey, and it takes on a viral effect, boom, then the traditional guys will come back to you and say, listen, next title, don't go through this route. I'm there for you. Or even your existing title, take it off the self-publishing rack and bring it to me. So, and there are many, of course, like for example, let's say hypothetically, the Tim Ferrisses of the world, who did not go out of that self-publishing model at all, because the model itself was so paying so well. But remember that those percentages
Are very few.
are very few.
Very, very interesting anecdotes that you were sharing on literature. And you spoke about finding an agent and having a friend and an ally in an agent. But let me take you back to friends and allies that you had when you were in school. And friends have a very calming effect, but at the same point in time can also be very disruptive, especially in your teenage years and growing up. Were books your closest friends, or were there
No. I had a circle of friends
which you were yet in touch with?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
In fact, my closest friends are actually a group of maybe around 6 or 8 friends who have been with me through my Cathedral and Xavier's years.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. I'm not a very social person, Rishabh. I think probably that's the reason I went into the world of storytelling.
Right.
as a world of writer, you're at peace with yourself.
Correct. Correct.
So, in any case, even during those years, I was not into going to parties. And in case someone didn't invite me for a party, I never felt bad.
You were happy.
I was happy. Nahi jana padega, nahi dress up karna padega,
Right.
all of that. Even when I went into parties, let me tell you, for me, it didn't feel like enjoyment, it felt like work. Uh, there was always that fear in my mind that I will be the odd one out standing in a corner with no one talking to me. And then I'll have to work the room. Now, of course, in the last, I would say, after I went for my master's and all of that, uh, I'm no longer worried. I mean, even if I go to a particular event, I'm quite happy to stand in a corner and nurse my drink. And I know that I will still have 10, 15 people coming up and eventually making a circle around me, and there will be enough conversation and what have you. But in those formative years, you were very worried of being considered the odd one out.
Correct. Correct.
You know.
Correct.
But I would say books
Were.
and my close circle of friends and probably Amar Chitra Katha comics besides books. ACK comics, of course. In those days, we besides Amar Chitra Katha, it was also Tintin
Correct.
and Asterix and Archies, all of those. In addition to the books that Nanaji was giving me, the books that Mom was giving me. But
That was your solace.
that was solace. But I was never one of those who had no friends. I had a very tight circle of friends.
Correct. And therefore, you yet come across as a person who is not necessarily, who's an introvert, not necessarily an extrovert as such.
Yeah, I'm not an extrovert.
Correct.
I'm not an For me, when people say, "Arey, nahi, you are so easy to talk to, and you are so comfortable delivering a lecture to 2,000 people," they don't understand that I'm actually working it.
Correct.
I'm working at it to be that way.
Correct. You're much more comfortable and happier by yourself and with your close people. The small difference yet is I am yet to grow up into the space where I am yet comfortable standing on the side in a party. I'm yet very socially awkward and rather not go to the party and find that it difficult sometimes in order to make conversation per se.
Yeah.
But
I'm very bad at small talk. Like, for example, this conversation is coming easily
because it's natural.
because it's not feeling that I have to work at it. Whereas typically, for example, if I go to an event which is, let's say, someone's shadi,
Correct.
I come across someone who I know. So how are you? Okay. Then what's happening these days? Now, what's new in your life? It's the same question asked 5 different ways.
The answers are the same. And
The answers are the same. Because now I'm an established writer, they feel obligated to ask me, what are you now working on? What's your next? And more often than not, I don't really even want to share. Because I know that they're genuinely not interested.
Correct.
And even if I try and explain, they will probably not understand.
Correct.
So,
this is a common dilemma that I face as well. But another thing that I must ask you, because you spoke about insecurities in a way, when the necessity of fitting in, especially when you're growing up.
Absolutely.
And was there any other sort of insecurity as a young adult that you
My weight.
Okay.
I was always fat. Yeah. And I was always insecure about the way I looked. In some ways, probably the fact my working hard at my grades, getting into Yale, all of those were to compensate in some ways for the other insecurities that I was dealing with. I think to a certain extent, I used to feel that I was not as social as many other people. I used to feel that my my relationships and contact circle was much more limited than what many of my friends had. Um, Not only that, but in later years, when I got into the world of business, I felt that I felt I was running a race against others. Actually, I was running a race in my own mind. So there was that insecurity, that uh, I want to be talked about, and I want my business to be talked about, and I want the fact that I've been very successful to be talked about.
But in
And then later on,
But in retrospect, you are being spoken about, and therefore perhaps you have the, you come from a position where after having seen it all,
Yeah.
you are saying that look, this is not necessarily the best thing that I mean the most important thing at that juncture.
you're right, Rishabh. The only difference is that, you see, if you are getting your royalty check, the question is, are you getting it as a byproduct or are you working towards it? For me, the way I see it is that if I don't have a if the intrinsic joy of researching and reading and developing a story is not there, then that royalty check is meaningless. The same applies with fame, that if it comes as a byproduct to your enjoyment, to the sense of satisfaction of telling the story, don't get me wrong, I think they are important. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that money is not important, or that getting a sense of achievement from being spoken about is not important. But it cannot be your primary driver, and that is what happens at an earlier age.
That
where-
you feel that is the primary.
that is the primary driver, and I think it requires many failures and many false starts before you begin to realize, as you go along, that I mean, that there are many. If I may slightly divert,
Sure, please.
I remember after COVID, when the first wave or the second wave had got over, I think must be around 2020 or 21. And I told my wife, I said, we've been locked up for so long. I want now travel is open. Let's go away for 4 or 5 days. And we went away to Jaipur. It was the first trip we were taking in a very, very long time. And I was at the Rambagh, and it was a winter day around New Year's. I told my wife, I said, listen, during the day, you get through your stuff, and I want to just go and I want to sit under a tree in the garden, which is what I did. I sat on a bench and didn't have my computer or anything. And I began to just feel such an immense sense of joy that I can be here, that I can enjoy this weather, that my wife is with me, that I have friends, that I have relationships, that I'm established in the world. All the small, small things which never used to cross my mind began to cross my mind. So I ended up using my phone to put down what is truly important to me, what drives me in terms of happiness. And
What drives you in terms of happiness now?
I only made a note of 5 points, and I hope I can remember them all, but I will try. I realized that number one, and this is not in any pecking order,
Sure.
but these are 5 criteria, as it were. One, that you need financial security. You need a certain amount of money to be able to run your life. It doesn't have to be a large amount of money, but it has to be that much which allows you to live with respectability in your own mind. It has to be that much that you can take a holiday once in a while. It has to be that much where, in case one of your family members is ill, then you're not running pillar to post. It has to be that much that can ensure that you can sleep at night. And this is something my Nanaji used to say, that money is is important to the extent that you don't have to worry about it.
Correct.
So that is very important, to have that much money that you don't need to worry about it. It also gives you the freedom of being able to pursue what you want to do in life. But on the flip side, which leads me to two, there are people who have tons of money, but their health is gone. And so with that money, with wealth, comes the health bit. And it's not only your own health, but also the health of the near and dear ones around you.
Correct.
Because all you need is one family member to be diagnosed with a very, very serious condition. And for the next 5 years, your life is only going to revolve around that. So it's very important to have some amount of wealth and some amount. Health hiccups are going to occur for everyone. But you need to be grateful to life in case it is able to give you 80 or 90%. I would say the third is having a purpose. That is there something that you wake up for in the morning and you say, this is what I want to do. It's like saying, hey, listen, there are these 20 things that I also want to make real. I have seen your organization, IIMN, from I think maybe over the last 15 or 20 odd years.
Yeah, 15 years now. Yes.
15 years.
Yes.
The earliest event I came for was the one at Retreat.
In 2013.
And see where you've gone. It comes from a purpose, and it doesn't feel like work. They say that people who are lucky in life get to do what they love. If you are a little luckier, then you get to do what you love, and you're also good at it. And if you're really lucky, you get to do what you love, you're good at it, and someone pays you for it. So to my mind, for me, for example, it is telling my stories.
Correct.
So I know that when I'm working on a story, if I have completed a chapter yesterday, I want to be up by 5 o'clock in the morning in order to start telling the next chapter.
Correct.
So having a purpose is exceptionally important. I would say the fourth is the relationships in your life. At the end of the day, even if you've got a bestseller on your hands, there is someone who needs to express that they are happy for you.
Correct.
So whether it is your wife, whether it's your kids, whether it's your siblings, your parents, it could be even your dog or cat. It could be your closest family relationships or friendships, school friendships. And it doesn't need to be a ton of people. It could be 5. But those relationships make your life worth living. I'm only a social drinker. I normally do not end up pouring myself a whiskey on my own. But that makes it all the more necessary that I need someone to share that whiskey with. So having those relationships makes it worthwhile. And finally, I would say is belief. Sometimes it's very easy to say, I did that. But having belief in a greater power, it doesn't mean being religious. What it means is believing that there is a reason why you were put here, believing that there is a greater power which is making certain things happen. The way at least I like to navigate my life is that I like to think that I'm sitting in a very, very fancy sports car. And that sports car is the type that I could accelerate to any speed that I want. It has all the maneuverability that is required, beautiful suspension, and so on and so forth. And of course, it's also going to turn heads on the road. But I have to keep in mind that what is the road and the road condition and the weather, that is not in my hands. So I may be the best driver and I may have the best car, but at the end of the day, it is the universe which conspires to give me a road or to provide a fork in the road or to provide a very, very steep slope all of that is where destiny comes in. So having that understanding that there are some things that are in my hand and that there are some things which are beyond me, I think that's very important.
That understanding, I think, is the most important understanding that one can reach in life, is what I personally think. That, you know, we are just a speck in the dust in the cosmos of the universe, and everybody is playing a part, and we should not get too happy if the part leads us to be king or to be otherwise.
Absolutely.
And therefore, that what you said is very important. But before I touch upon that, something very important that you mentioned, which is very applicable to young people, is relationships. And you know, in your formative years, when it came to relationships with your family members first,
Yes.
that is your mom and dad, did you have a very, you know, was there a rebellious Ashwin Sanghi growing up in your teenage years, or were you always calm and dignified like how you are today?
I think growing up years, whether it was me or whether it was my brother or sister, and I was the youngest amongst the three siblings, but I don't think any of us were rebellious kids.
Okay.
Uh, we, we may not have been at the top of our class, but we were also not at the bottom of the class. We weren't failing in any subject. You know, as long as you were average, it was fine. It wasn't as if we were necessarily the most prominent kids in terms of debates or elocutions or sports or what have you. But it equally, we weren't the kids who were being pulled out for detention or being given pink cards or yellow cards or whatever, disciplinary action where our parents are having to go and beg with the principal that, listen, please keep him in.
So you're not a notorious child.
Not at all. Not at all. I think the rebellion in me began to show up much later when I got into work. And that was primarily because of the fact that I was always a creative person. And unfortunately, in that creativity sometimes ends up causing a conflict in straight-jacketed traditional business households. So I found myself at loggerheads with my dad and my brother and the older generation of executives who were there, and that is the time I began to realize that, or I began to question myself, that is this really your path? So probably had it not been for those conflicts that happened in my work life in my 30s, probably I may never have taken the decision to try and write that novel.
So is it correct in understanding that the friction led you to think, saying, चलो अब ये नहीं करते हैं, let's focus on.
मैंने कभी भी ऋषभ ये नहीं माना कि मैं नहीं करूंगा. So जैसे मैंने कहा, Rozabal line started, the writing started in 2002, got completed in 2005, got published in 2008, self-published in 2007, traditionally published in 2008. I was working full-time all along through this process. Even when I went into the second book, Chanakya's Chant, which came out early 2011, I was still working full-time.
But it was
the Krishna Key came out 2013-14, I was still working full-time. It was only after the Krishna Key
that you stopped.
That I said, look, this is what is giving me joy, and I'm happy to be involved to the extent where it, so I would say the way you could divide the phases in my life, that 2013-14, before that, I was a businessman who was also a writer. Now I'm a writer who's also a businessman. So that's the change.
The little bit of friction between you and the family and your elder brother and your father gave you the thought saying, chalo, because I'm a creative person and this is not necessarily something that may be well accepted. Is that correct?
Along with that, parallel to that were failures. Parallel to that were failures.
In the business.
Within the business space itself.
Correct. Okay.
So I think to a certain extent, I began to question myself that that is it that because of the fact that I grew up in this home and I grew up in this business environment, I took it for granted that
What I
this is the environment in which I will flourish. Uh, is it possible
that there is
that there is another environment in which I may do even better?
Am I correct in understanding this? That sometimes, especially when it comes to people who come from lineage and privilege and
Yes.
so on and so forth, we're always given or we're raised in environments
Yes.
which are essentially putting us in direction A or B.
Yes.
But there may be a direction C
Yes.
that we may be good at.
Yes.
And your early exposure, thanks to your Nanaji, etc.,
That's right.
shaped you in a very different manner. Today we see, thanks to the failures that you had in your
Yes.
A and B,
Yes.
that you said that chalo, let's explore C.
See,
And
absolutely.
is that a correct
I,
understanding?
I see too many people in life who are not living, they simply exist. There's a difference between living and existing. And I see so many people who are doing very well in life. And they've got flourishing businesses and they've got very comfortable homes and they've got a very stable life. Their family life is also stable. But that spark is not there because probably they were never given the opportunity to be able to explore another dimension.
So it's not always A and B. Look for the C. Perhaps.
Perhaps.
Perhaps the C will lead you to the A plus.
Absolutely.
But I must also touch upon love. In the beginning, my understanding of love was infatuation as
Yeah.
a teenager.
Yeah.
And then it evolves over a period of time and then it goes on eventually to love everyone equally
Yeah.
and so on and so forth if you reach that level.
Yes.
But how was your understanding of love when you were a teenager and how has it evolved over a period of time?
Well, to a certain extent, I think after I came back from my master's program, that was around 93. And for the longest time, I told my parents, I said, I don't think I want to right now get married. I want to establish myself. I want to be standing on my own 2 feet and whatever. So by Marwadi standards,
You were late.
I was actually late because by the time I got married, it was 98. Yeah, 98 or 99. So I was 30 or 31
Wow.
by the time
And
I
in
got
93.
married. Yeah. But what I can tell you is by then I had had some relationships, some of which had lasted for more than a few years.
Wow.
But by the time that I reached 1998, I realized that, hey, listen, now either I settle myself or otherwise I don't know what is going to be there in store. And that's the time I told my parents, I said, listen, do you have someone in mind? And of course, they were happy as hell that ये आके पूछ रहा है that आपका कोई है क्या? So that's the time I went through the arranged route.
Right.
I must have met a few potential matches, but with my wife Anushka, uh, it would surprise you to note that on the third meeting with her, I asked her to marry me.
Wow.
So that was those 3 meetings happened over the space of 2 weeks.
Oh, that's amazing. And you were sure in the third meeting that
Yes.
Anushka is the one?
Yes. And that is what, and now we've been married, by the way, 27 years.
Which in today's day and age is gold.
Right? Yeah. So
But what led you to believe that she is the one, if I may?
the first couple of meetings were actually relatively inconsequential. And, you know, this is something which probably the youngsters can pick up on. I think what I was wanting was not answers from her, but questions. And on the third meeting, she came prepared with questions. That, okay, where do you see our lives going? And, how are you going to provide? And stuff which was was in some ways very, very important to me. I just got a sense that this is a person who's very well grounded and is asking me stuff that is actually relevant. And we sat for 2 or 3 hours, and at the end of those 2, 3 hours, I said, listen, you know, I think from my side, I've made up my mind. What about you? And this is what leads me to believe that some of these things cannot be formulaic. Sometimes you can have everything going for you in a relationship. You may be getting that sense of comfort and intimacy, and there could also be the infatuation element and all of that.
Butterflies in the stomach type.
Butterflies in the stomach and all of that. And there could be another one where there are the signals are all mixed up, and there could be a third where the signals are all wrong. But what is it that allows a third meeting to give you such a strong instinct? And, one of the books that I wrote, 13 Steps to Bloody Good Luck,
Okay.
I've talked about
Okay.
the fact that what we call instinct is actually not a sixth sense. Our brain is moving at a pace where we can't even understand the number of calculations that are going on in our heads. And very often, what we attribute to a sixth sense is simply the brain having already figured out a bunch of data points, which at our conscious level, we don't realize that it's figured out. So somehow or the other, you see it all the time. You see it with business deals. You see it with relationships. You see it with even examinations. You may have done all the prep in the world, and you sit down for that exam paper, and on question 3, you don't know, do I go right or do I go left? And then it's at that point of time, that sixth sense which kicks in. So there's a lot of that which happens in life. And I think today now, when I'm sort of on the eve of entering into my 60s, I genuinely now understand the proverb which says that true wisdom lies in knowing that you don't know everything.
Of course.
Or maybe true wisdom lies in knowing that you're not really wise. But whichever way you want to say it. But the point is that understanding that there are many, many things that you don't know.
Of course, of course. But love sometimes, and especially for young people, and you mentioned this, is something where compatibility has to happen. Where we're looking for green flags. Now it's the world of green flags and red flags and so on and so forth. And everything is a checklist per se to be measured.
Of course.
And sometimes, like you said, that it is more than the green flags or the butterflies in the stomach per se. It is compatibility in a way, where two people come together as a partnership, and it's not necessarily the infatuation that is going to keep it lasting for a period of time, but it is much more than that.
Yeah.
Is that something?
I think the way at least I see it is that when you start on a road trip,
Right.
where you're planning to drive from, let's say, Bombay to Delhi,
Right.
what do you need? You need the gadi.
Correct.
You need probably Google Maps. You probably need the highway signs. You also need to figure out any stretches where you may run out of fuel, and so on and so forth. So essentially, there is an element of planning. So the initial hours will go by like a breeze. The music is on, the AC is on. Arey, we are now out on an adventure, right? But that then begins to wear off after the first few hours are gone.
How do you keep it going? Yes.
How do you keep it going? And it's the same question that I have to ask myself when I start on a story, Rishabh.
How do you
Any story in the Bharat series will take me 2 years or 2.5 years to actually from start to finish. So the thought that is always there in my mind is that, okay, Ashwin, ye sab to ho gaya. Story looks damn good, quote unquote sexy, right? And you will also do the research. But what happens if you get bored with that particular idea after you've done the research? Then all of it is down the drain. Or you've written the plot outline or started writing the plot outline, and then you say, no, this is not it.
Has that happened with you?
It's happened before, and that's the reason why I spend so much of time figuring out what that next story is. Uh, I think I've discussed this with you before, that I capture every idea that hits me all the time. That when I'm starting on a new novel, I will always review what are the ideas and then figure out, okay, what are the top three that I could work on. And then I will again juggle them around in my mind till the time that I figure out, okay, this is a story that I can see that I will write it and I will not get bored of it
Like
after 2 years.
like
And
your-
that's what you need in a spouse, no?
That's in your relationship with Anushka. It's the same thing.
Exactly. That how do you make sure that it's going to be interesting going forward? Because it's not going to feel the same way
Correct.
as it did in the initial stages. And I think over a period of time, what I mean, like for example, I would say that with Anu, my greatest advantage was that when I decided to make, for example, the transition into writing, not once did she ask me that, Ashwin, it's all very well, but how is this going to work? What about our living? Is this going to change? When I was not sure about my work situation, and I said, when I took that trip to Kashmir and I came across the Rozabal tomb, and I was spending 18 months or 20 months researching that story, and the first person who put a laptop in front of me and said, "Why don't you write it up?" was Anushika. Uh, So, someone who is not only there with you in the joyous moments, but also in the moments when you are down. In fact, those are far more important.
Don't attend a birthday party, but attend the funeral.
I think the other part of it also, Rishabh, is that over a period of time, what you want out of your spouse also undergoes a change. During the early years, it's far more about feeling like you're dating. It's more about the physical element. Uh, it's more about the external signs like flowers and candy and Valentine's Day and what have you. Over a period of time, it moves into a more steady rhythm where you both are also facing certain obstacles, challenges, and you feel that sense of partnership in terms of that we are both there together in this partnership. Then it moves beyond that also into the what I call the comfort of silence. That can you both be there in the same room without feeling the need to talk? I mean, the amount of space that she has given me, uh, you know, uh, it's not possible to be a writer's wife without giving up a lot, because you're either holed up, you're either traveling to do some research, or you've gone away to some lit fest, or you are holed up reading a book because that needs to form a part of the next chapter, or you've got up at 5, so you feel the necessity of going to sleep by 9 o'clock, whereas the other person would ideally love to be going for a party or something. So over a period of time, you begin to realize that having a spouse who understands you is so important.
She must have given a lot of space, I'm sure,
Big time.
as an author to pen things. But let me ask you a couple of questions about the author that is Ashwin Sanghi, because considering we have you, and I know that you're always doing one thing after the other, so I'm mindful of the time as well.
Sure.
But today, in today's day and age, you know, you are a celebrated author now, a voice in literature across not just in India but overseas as well. But today we live in a world where there is rampant polarization, there is complete misinformation. you've got WhatsApp forwards and WhatsApp universities now, and therefore there is a lot of blurring between fact and fiction. And as somebody who marries in a way fact and fiction,
You could almost call me the perpetrator of a lot of conspiracy theories. So I'm scared about where this question is going, but I'll allow you to complete it.
No, but that's what I'm trying to say. That what you are doing, of course, is very different from what is happening, where people are using propaganda in order to divide people more than unite them. Yours is in order to spark interest in a way, like you sparked interest in a generation about the country. So my question is, how can a young person tell what is fact and what is fiction in a world where there are deep fakes and where AI is almost able to replicate this conversation in a way better than what we've conversed?
Absolutely.
So how does one tell what is true and false?
Rishabh, I would say that probably the way at least I like to think about it is that ideologies and the polarization between ideologies has always been there.
Correct.
It's not something new.
Correct.
Probably every generation before us has also felt that the degree of polarization is highest now. The way at least I see it is that if you look at the spaces that I operate in, which is the world of legend and myth, and the world of history, and then I take inspiration from both of these sectors, and then spin my stories around that. My favorite definition of myth comes from C.S. Lewis, who said that a myth is a lie that reveals a truth. Right? In other words, what he was alluding to was the fact that you could have a fanciful story, but rather than worrying about the superficial facts around it, try and understand what was the deeper purpose of narrating that story in the first place. On the other hand, you have a body of work which is called history. And the way at least I see it, one of my favorite definitions within the space of history is George Santayana, who said that history is a pack of lies about events that never happened, written by people who were never there. Now, instantly, whenever I use this definition, there are 100 people waiting to jump on me. That how can you say that? What I'm trying to say is that we believe that history is a set of facts. But that set of facts has to be narrated by someone. And it is impossible to remove the narrator's bias from that narration. Not possible. Anyone who says that this is a perfectly impartial recounting of events is wrong. It cannot be. Which means, in other words, that there is an element of bias, there is an element of a viewpoint which comes into every historical narrative. So the way I see it is that don't believe that, I at least don't believe that everything that is written in the world of myth or in the world of legend is purely fictional. I believe that some of it must have been based on some truth which caused it to, if I may sort of, I'm sorry, I know that you have that urgency to jump in. I'm going to hold you back right now. That if a story like the Ramayana was narrated 300 different ways, then there must have been some great event or person which caused those 300 narratives to happen. Over the years, over the generations, we would have applied mirch masala through those generations to those narratives. We would have adapted those narratives to the sensibilities of the geography or the generation that was consuming the story. But that core core idea of the story of some great king who went to fight some great war must have been there. That is part one. But the corollary to that is that everything that is in history cannot be factual. Because after all, there's an element, just as in myth and legend, everything is not fanciful, everything is not fictional, there is some fact. Similarly, in history, there is some fiction. Now, the problem is, how do you distinguish? And the way, at least I see it, is that the only way to have an independent viewpoint and an independent opinion is by exposing yourself to the maximum number of opinions that there are. Take an event in Indian history which we call the First War of Indian Independence, 1857. We are also taught in our history books that it could be the Great Rebellion of 1857. Now, surprisingly, that event is not taught at school level in the UK. Most of colonial history, in fact, is not taught at school level in the UK. It will probably be taught maybe for a master's or a specialization. But out there, it will not be called the Great Rebellion. It will be called the Sepoy Mutiny of 1857. It's the same event, but narrated from two very, very different viewpoints. Now, I don't want to trash one over the other, but I want to be exposed to both, and I want to glean from both where the possible East and West could meet.
So India's partition should be studied from both India's textbooks and also Pakistan's.
Well, of course, that's not a very good example.
No, I'm just asking you.
But the perspective I have is that the way at least I see it is that if there are 5 narratives of an event, I am better informed in case I have exposure to all 5 narratives rather than only one, which was taught to me in my ICSE textbook. That's the point. The way I like to think of it is that you go for a movie, a 3D movie, watching Superman or Spider-Man, and the figure almost leaps out at you from the screen. How does that work? You put on a pair of 3D glasses, and instead of one beam of light, there are multiple beams of light coming to you. And all of those multiple beams get aggregated in order to give you a holographic image, a 3D image. In other words, you are able to almost get a 360 or a 180 view of that particular image. It's not a perfect science. It's not perfect. It's imperfect. But you are better informed than you would have been with a 2D. That's the way, at least, I'm now not talking purely about history or legend or myth. I'm talking about any narrative. So that the more narratives that you are willing to absorb and expose yourself to, the better the chances are that you are likely better informed. And even when you come across a false narrative on social media, which is very highly probable these days, you will still have the ability to be able to say, wait on, does this ring true?
But what happens with narratives, unfortunately or fortunately, is that then they turn into beliefs. And what you rightly said about history also is that it is his story. Yeah. The person who is the victor is writing his story in the way that he wants himself to be remembered.
Of course.
And the Sepoy Mutiny, the beautiful example that you gave, is the revolt, whether it was the first freedom struggle or whether it is the Sepoy Mutiny. Now, when these interpretations become beliefs, beliefs then turn into actions in one form or the other, and then that leads to a very difficult world per se, and that's why we have wars in a way, because it stems from that belief saying that the country or our country is superior to every other country.
Yes.
India, of course, we are very lucky that we believe in Vasudeva Kutumbakam as a tenant
Yes,
in
absolutely.
and therefore the world is one family. But the idea that these beliefs become very strong and these beliefs come in us at a very formative age.
Yes.
Some of these beliefs in our country are, of course, spoken about more than most. I would like your opinion on some, of course, if you feel comfortable only then. Do they exist, or is this a figment of our imagination or somebody's imagination per se? Dwarka.
No, so now, for example, for the vast majority of people, Dwarka is simply a symbol of the fact that, it is obviously referred to in all our scriptures, including the Bhagavad Gita and the Mahabharata, and we are told that that was the glorious city, the Swarna city, as it were, of Krishna. And for the longest time, we've come to accept the fact that it is part of our mythology. And we didn't really bother to explore whether it was part of our mythology, or was it part of our belief system, or was it actually part of our history. And this is where I somehow feel that the rigor that should be applied to many of the subjects in our country, we have not given them the sort of resources and time and attention that we should have. So, for example, you will, even though you have very little evidence to, let's say, prove the existence of Atlantis, but that doesn't mean that researchers will not invest substantial resources and hours and efforts in figuring out as to whether there could be an element of truth to it. Similarly, for example, with Dwarka, had it not been for Dr. Rao, who undertook major oceanographic expeditions into Bet Dwarka and the neighboring areas, probably we might not have come across ruins under the ocean, which indicate that something did exist. Whether that was Dwarka or not, we probably can't tell even today. But where I'm coming from is that whether it is Dwarka, or whether it is tomorrow Ram Mandir, or whether it is the Taj Mahal, you could have multiple narratives around it. If you read, let's say, Pianoak, you would say that no, this is not Taj Mahal, this is Tejo Mahalia, right? Or, for example, tomorrow, let's say the long dispute that happened over the Ram Janma Bhoomi site. It was, again, what was it? It was a clash of narratives. But that clash of narratives is very important to happen within our own minds. That's what I'm talking about. That it means that you're willing to entertain two completely opposing ideas in parallel and give them the respect that they deserve in your mind before making up your mind. I find that that does not happen nowadays for most issues. So there will be one, there was that old joke which said that on the right there is very little right, and on the left there's nothing left, right? So you have these two cults on the left and the right, and so you will have someone on the left saying that nothing of any significance whatsoever emerged from Bharat. Everything that was meaningful only came from outside India. And then you will have the cult on the right saying nothing of significance happened anywhere but Bharat. What is the chance that either of them are right? Where, at least the way at least I look at it, is that if I am having a dish which requires three seasonings, all those three seasonings need to be there in the right proportions for me to be able to enjoy that dish. Currently, social media, as well as commentaries, as well as narratives, they distill it down to a very black or white.
There are 50 shades of grey, is what you're saying.
There are so many shades involved in every narrative, in every story. Now, please don't get me wrong. I think at least where what has stood for me, what has worked for me, is trying to read up as much as I can. But I genuinely worry about the coming generations because they are reading less. They are consuming more. And even what they are consuming, at least when we were reading, we knew that this is on the fiction shelf and that is on the non-fiction shelf.
Nowadays, the fiction books come into the normal
No,
shelf.
yeah, and not only that, but when you're consuming a documentary or you're consuming a 2-minute clip which has been generated by AI, what are the sources that have been used? You will remember that with all my books in the Bharat series, there's a generous mixing of fact and fiction.
Correct.
But I would probably be amongst the only novelists of that type of fiction who will give you another 20 pages of resources at the back of the book. Why do I do it? Why do I invest the time in giving you a bibliography of sorts? The reason being because very often, let's say take the Krishna key. The end of the Krishna key, the last 1/3 of the book takes place at the Taj Mahal. And that Taj Mahal, lots of conspiracy theories are thrown at you. That what does this mean? What does this symbol mean? Right? If you will look at the resources, you will find that I have also provided you resources which are countering the very opinion that I have expressed in the book.
But isn't that what Purva Paksha was supposed to be? That where you understood the narrative from the other side before you expounded what you essentially
of course,
are saying.
Absolutely.
But the anglicization of debate, of course,
and if you go back to the very roots of Sanatan, what defines Sanatan? Not that when you say that, listen, I am willing to accept a plurality of views, that there isn't one truth, that there are multiple truths. And I think this was beautifully explained by Shashi Tharoor, who said that, look, I'm not at the end of the day with Sanatan, it is not about tolerance. It is about acceptance. Which means, in other words, that I have a truth and that Rishabh has a truth, and I am not just going to merely tolerate your truth because you say it's your truth, and I don't believe it's a truth. I tolerate it. That is very different to saying I accept it as a valid path, and I say that, listen, Rishabh, I will respect your path and you also respect my path. Now, that is something which is very, very unique to Sanatan, and in that sense, I believe that somewhere along the way, a reawakening of sorts needs to happen, where we say that, listen, we are better off in case there is a multiplicity of views, because then that indicates that we are not in some sort of echo chamber.
And that should be the way it is. And Vivekananda, the essentials of Vivekananda, and that's what he's taken from what Tharoor had borrowed from. And
there are people who are going to watch that part and they'll say, but you know what? For 70 years, from 1947 up to 2014, you fed me one narrative in the school textbooks. I agree. We've done tremendous harm and damage by not allowing multiple points to be expressed. But now we need to be equally cautious that we are not swinging the pendulum right to the other end. At some point of time, you will need equilibrium, no? That where when you are talking about a certain event, like let us say, for example, Netaji, Subhash Chandra Bose. By now, we should have opened up all the files. There is no greater disinfectant than sunlight. Bring it out into the open. Create digital archives of everything. Say, listen, guys, we want 1,000 different magnifications and lenses to be applied to this story. And then let us have all the views out there. But instead, what you do, you keep certain things hidden And then that results eventually in conspiracy theories.
For a country that is largely close to the equator, we are always deficient when it comes to our vitamins of sunlight.
Absolutely.
And so also in our history, and so also in secrets that we keep, they are far
Absolutely.
away from the light.
That's right.
But what you've said is beautiful, where you said that different perspectives should be accepted in history textbooks today, and it should not swing the pendulum the other way.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing I say of both India and the world.
Yeah.
And therefore it's India's international first model United Nations, which later on became movement to United Nations in a way. But studying both the East and the West, and of course you were exposed to it.
If I may say one more thing, Rishabh,
Please.
the problem with the viewpoint that Ashwin Sanghi has expressed is that it doesn't get eyeballs.
Yes. Yeah.
Because unless you are extremely on this side or extremely on that side, that's where all the noise happens.
Correct.
That's where all the attention is.
Correct.
But guys like me who say, listen, I want to hear everything, and then I want to use my common sense in terms of it's almost like solving a murder mystery. That when you are interviewing the witnesses, many of them are going to lie. And then you have to figure out what is the lie, where is the truth, what does the evidence tell you, what was the blood splatter like. I'm sorry, this is the crime writer in me coming out. But you have to then solve the murder based on a variety of information that comes before you.
Of course.
We don't apply those rigorous standards to events that are narrated.
We're quick to be both the judge, jury, and the executioner for anything that comes about. And
yeah, so you look at these camps of Nehru and Savarkar, no? So are you trying to tell me that in his entire lifetime, Savarkar didn't do 5 things that were great for this country? And are you trying to tell me that Nehru was only incompetence? But if you read the normal narratives that emerge from the extreme right and extreme left, that's what it feels like.
But if you read their own writings, like with one of my favorite books, The Experiments of Truth, you realize that there are, like you rightly said, it's not black and white, but so many shades in which you can see the man. And
that is with us also, no?
Yes, of course.
I mean, okay, you call me this doyen of Indian writing, as it were, and you call me this great storyteller. But when I go back to my home, what are my weaknesses? Do I lose my temper? Do I drink too much? Do I overindulge, which causes me to become fat? What are the things that are wrong with me? And can I really genuinely look at myself and say, every decision I took, Ashwin, was the right one? There are so many decisions that I will have taken which are wrong, which means, in other words, I am ultimately a product of multiple things, some good, some great, some not so good, some terribly bad.
But the sum total of all failed experiments then only can be slightly successful, is what I believe.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you've not failed as many times. But when we talk about failure or incompetencies, and because you brought that up as my second last question to ask you, is how does one deal with certain emotions? And whether you see Indian texts or whether you've read your fair share of Western history and philosophy as well, if you can give examples of your favorite anecdote, so to say, from these books, as to how young people or people just generally should deal with, say, anger.
See, of course,
I give you different words, anger being the first.
It depends on how you channelize it. Everyone experiences anger. But the point is, Rishabh, that you take, for example, let's say we have the Arthashastra, and in the Arthashastra we have this person who wrote it, whether you call him Chanakya or Vishnugupta, or you call him Kautilya. And of course, the Arthashastra, he doesn't have, we know a lot about what this person thought, but we don't know that much about him through the Arthashastra. For that, we have to then again look at work of fiction, 700 years later, which is the Mudra Rakshas by which is a play. It's a Mudra Rakshas is not written as a historical narrative. It's written as a play to be performed. And then in that, the life of Chanakya gets described. And in that, we come across the event where he has gone for the banquet, and which has been hosted by Dhananand. And Dhananand does not treat him well, does not give him the respect of a learned person that he is. And by then, of course, the cruelty of the Nandas is well known. And at which point of time, Chanakya unties his shikha, which becomes a very important and dramatic point within the TV series also. And where he says that I will not tie my shikha till the time that I have not uprooted your entire lineage, and that your lineage will not survive. And then after that, of course, how he recruits Chandragupta Maurya and then eventually ends up working towards making him the king and establishing the Mauryan Empire. So if it is channeled correctly, anger is something that can drive people to do great things. But if anger is simply not, it's almost like having a vast glacier and a vast river, but not creating the required irrigation canals. So
There's no point of it then.
वो पानी जो है वो बह जाएगा समुंदर में, but उसका कुछ वैल्यू ज्यादा नहीं होगा. I think channeling anger is something which, and people don't even realize that they are actually, that what they are experiencing is anger.
When I say jealousy, is there something that comes to mind, some anecdote?
Probably from the Mahabharata. I mean, honestly speaking, if you think about it, Indraprasth was considered to be the most fabulous city that could have been created by the Pandavas. And Indraprasth, from my perspective, was the reason for the downfall also. So sometimes I genuinely feel like, for example, there are very many times when I want to push myself even harder. There are times when I'll be working on a book and I will say, if this could have 2 more rewrites, it will be perfection. And you realize at a certain point of time that no, this is the time to stop. Because the vast majority of your readers have already got what you are trying to say. That further 10% or 15% refinement is only going to consume productive time, but it's not going to necessarily help. Even when, my grandfather used to tell me, he would say that it's very easy in some ways to deal with failure because you are used to being kicked around. You're already on the ground. He said more difficult to deal with success because that's the time that your feet are not on the ground. That's the time you begin to float. So I always tell those who are getting into the world of writing also that if you do make it in the world of writing or storytelling or what have you, make sure you keep your feet on the ground. Make sure that you understand that when you look at the page which you have just written, take a moment to fold your hands and do pranam to Ma Saraswati. Because everything that came on that page was not yours. It was her inspiration. You were merely a medium. That being grounded makes it easier for you not to show off. Because chances are that when you are floating, someone else is getting affected by it.
Pride is the next one, which is very much connected to what you just said. Anything that comes to mind as to how people should deal with pride? Like you said that, you should be, your feet should always be on the ground. And you should remember that.
Yeah.
It's difficult when you're experiencing.
But again, we have this beautiful example within the Ramayana of Bharat, who, despite having been entirely offered the kingdom on a platter, his brother is exiled, and he still says कि मैं तो इनके बस चप्पल, इनके सैंडल जो हैं, मैं I will leave them on the throne, and I will rule in his name. So, I mean, the point is, somewhere along the way, I feel that we attach the outcomes so closely with ourselves. You know, I'm sorry, I'm going to each time go back to my own personal
Yes, of course.
understanding that today when I take out a book in the Bharat series, I don't understand Sanskrit. I mean, I can understand it, but I can't read it or write it, which means that anything that involves some of the original texts, I need to depend on at least 3 or 4 different scholars. And what I'll do is I'll normally raise the same question with multiple people, same concept of trying to get multiple views in order to figure out as to how does this actually work out. But if I think about it, whether it is ground level research, whether it is Sanskrit, whether it is the first or second or third edits, whether it is the cover design, whether it's the marketing of the book, there are multiple people who form a part of that whole process.
Of course.
It is so easy for me to say, "Arey yaar, I am Ashwin Sanghi and I am a bestseller." No. You needed so many people to hold your hand. You needed so many people to prop you up. That's very important, to have an understanding of the ecosystem that supports you. I would say that probably, Rishabh, there are multiple passages in all of our texts which deal with these issues of pride and lust and jealousy.
The last one I was going to ask you was lust.
But honestly, the greatest example of that is someone like Ravan, where at the end of the day, the greatest of wisdom, someone who could compose the Shiv Tandav Strot, was so learned in his ways, was so multifaceted and talented, someone who could keep Shani right at the base of his throne, someone who could completely, who could be under the control of Shivji and yet get Shivji to relent and give him the greatest of powers. Someone like that also could not control as basic an emotion as lust. So all of this is only an indication for us. You started out this by asking me what is a myth and what is history. And I said a myth is a lie that reveals a deeper truth. So even if the Ramayana has 80% made up stuff, it's revealing to you that deeper truth. That what happens, it's years and generations of collective wisdom being narrated through those stories. And the one thing that our ancients understood better than us is that the shortest distance between two people is a story.
Of course.
So they understood that हम भले ही इसको जितना भी इसका exposition कर लें, but instead put it down into a story and उसका जो रस है, उसका जो निचोड़ है, लोगों के पास पहुंच जाएगा.
But the thing with stories is also this, it's a game of Chinese whispers, and now it's gone through not one generation but tens of generations that have passed on the same story.
Absolutely.
And therefore, as the 100th year passes on Harry Potter, on J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter, perhaps the first copy would be very different from what is published in year 150.
Absolutely. So, and not only that, you also have the possibility that a lot of things which were considered as fictional in our times may be considered as factual.
Very true.
100 years down the line.
Very, very true.
But the converse also applies.
Correct.
That a lot of things that we are today talking about in the realm of myth could also be real.
So is this true? Sorry, I'm digressing before the last question, but which is a small rapid fire. But Because I must ask you, so is God also, are gods also factual in your opinion? Or are they just an interpretation of something that we want to believe in?
So first of all, okay, let's understand what do we consider to be God. And this was an interesting question that actually came up in an interaction that I had with Dan Brown.
Okay.
He was here in, I think, 2014 or 15. And the way you are sitting across from me and asking me questions, I was given the job to interview him at NCPA. So we did it in, we are doing it in a studio. We were in front of a couple of 1,500 people. But this interesting question did not come up at that interview, but it came up later, because after the interview was over, he said, Ashwin, what are you doing at dinner time? So I said, let's go. We went to the Oberoi and we sat down. And at the business club, we sat down there, and they kept it open for us almost till around 2:30 in the morning. By which time, honestly, both he and I and a few of the people around us, we were, for lack of a better term, well lubricated. And he was, I think, at that point of time doing the work on Origin, probably. I'm not sure which was the next novel that was coming up. And he said, the discussion occurred where he said, what is God? And I was also in a little bit of that sort of a mood. So there was a pen and paper on the table. I wrote G is equal to infinity minus K. And I gave it to him. So he said, Ye kya hai? He didn't say Ye kya hai, but he said, what is this? So I said, G is what we consider to be divine. And so infinity is the entire Brahmand. The universes that have already existed, the universes that exist, the universes that will exist, the dimensions, all the dimensions of that universe, whatever is already known, whatever is yet to be known, all of that is in the egg-shaped universe, Brahmanda, Brahmand. And K is the extent of human knowledge. So the Egyptians saw the sun rise in the east, they saw it set in the west. They didn't know what it was. They called it Ra. He's the sun god, and he travels across the sky in his chariot. And then later on, he gets tired, and when he goes to sleep, then darkness arrives. So they explain day and night through the metaphor of Ra and his chariot. Later on, of course, we had Galileo and Copernicus and Aryabhat and various others who eventually told us that it's a ball of energy and that there is a movement of the planets around it and so on and so forth. As a result of which, Ra, in some ways, lost his divine status. Because now we could explain it. So in that sense, G is what cannot be explained. The universe minus human knowledge. Right? But then he said that, Ashwin, I'm also in agreement with you, because my terminology is a little different, because I call it God of the gaps. That the gaps in human understanding is what is called God. So I said, yes, Dan, but there is a proviso to this. I said, mathematically, any equation which has infinity on one side is indeterminate. So no matter what you do, it's indeterminate. And in some ways, that is what divinity is. What is indeterminate? Because if you take the equation G is equal to infinity minus K, this is an indeterminate equation because of the presence of infinity. And probably that's the way I would like God to be left. Indeterminate. That there are some things that I don't know, some things that I don't understand, and they should be beyond my understanding. So that is where that conversation left off. So in that sense, when you say plural, gods, the way at least I see it from a Sanatani perspective is that we were trying to understand the one through multidimensionality. So for us, it wasn't Deviji, but there were manifestations, Lakshmi, Saraswati, Kali, and even within those manifestations, we went into multiple sub-dimensions. So therefore, you have the 9 forms of Mata in Navratri. So we split down each of those dimensions or qualities or traits into more so that we could try and understand. When I was writing the Rozabal line and I looked at the trinities, Lakshmi, Saraswati, Kali, and I noted it down on my pad as a triangle with the apex pointing down. Then I looked at Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, which is a triangle with pointing up. Then I overlapped them and I said, boss, isn't this the Star of David? And that came across in the Rozabal line, that could there be a connection between the two? But if you really think of it holistically, if either the connection didn't exist and it was only Ashwin's imagination, or there was something to it, if there was something to it, wouldn't it give you a reason to say maybe this was talking about oneness and each of those points was talking about a dimension or a facet? So that is the way I like to think about it, that all the various figures that we have within our pantheon are basically attempting to understand different traits of a single whole.
And that is perhaps what Advait Vedanta speaks about also in a way. But I particularly enjoy what Voltaire said about God. He said, if God did not exist, then man would perhaps have to invent him.
Invent him, exactly. So that eternal question, of course, Voltaire has not explained to us, right?
No, nobody.
That did God invent man or did man invent God? And I think we are going to be asking ourselves that for multiple generations.
Very true. Very, very true. But, we do this small rapid fire to end the conversation.
I hate rapid fire.
It's very simple.
Okay.
But
you're trying to trip me up, no?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I think we've already got some parts like that.
Okay.
But I would normally ask a book that changed you, but in your case, 3 books that have profoundly impacted you growing up as a young adult.
Top of the list, Autobiography by Paramahans Yoganand. That was a book which, till the time that I didn't read it again and again, and then even now, if I go back to it, I'll still probably
learn something.
Yeah, I'll probably understand something which I didn't understand earlier. I would say probably that was a title which made me understand that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Just because you can't understand it doesn't make it less real.
Correct.
So that was one book that really affected me. I would say the second book that really enchanted me, and now the series is coming on Netflix, which is Freedom at Midnight. And that was not because of the content. I have some huge issues with the narrative again. I have some huge issues with the narrative. But I loved the fact that history could be conveyed where I actually wanted to read it. History is so boring, so dry. Can you actually take it back to its roots of telling a story? And so that was a book that I appreciated tremendously because of the fact that it felt like a story, not like history. And I would say a third book that played a very important role was probably Midnight's Children. Not because of any other reason, Rishabh, but because I feel completely inadequate when I read that book. And I felt inadequate then, and I still feel inadequate. I know that I can never be that. It's something to sort of almost hold up to and almost like sort of, say that, okay, this sort of writing, how can you ever be there? It's initial days. It used to provoke profound jealousy. We were talking about elements, profound jealousy that I wish I could write like this.
Do you think then, Rush, these other books that have been subsequently banned should not have been?
I'm against banning anything, frankly. In some ways, you could say, almost like an Anand Ranganathan in terms of absolutist. In terms of that, look, there will be certain things which are palatable, some things which are unpalatable. There are some things which will meet your sensibilities. There are things which are going to run contrary to your sensibilities. But the fact of the matter is that if I have sat in your interview and propounded the importance of having multiple narratives, how can I then, with a straight face, tell you that something should be banned or not banned? Nothing should be banned. And then it should be decided what you want to consume and what you don't want to consume. I don't want someone telling me what I can or cannot consume.
The favorite book, your favorite book from your work?
From my work?
From your work.
From
your literary work.
From my,
your
okay.
own favorite book, yes.
So I would say probably the most underappreciated novel within the Bharat series is probably Keepers of the Kal Chakra. And that was a title that I had so much fun writing, because you mentioned Fritjof Capra during the early part of our interview. And that Tower Physics was, like, it was almost like Batti on moment.
Correct.
Batti on moment. Correct. So I wanted to take elements of that and spin a story around the possibility that if you believed that there were overlaps between quantum theory and spirituality, then could you affect real world changes, not taking the quantum route, but taking the spirituality route effectively. Because after all, both will get you to the same place.
Correct.
And I had so much fun because it took me 6-8 months understanding quantum theory. Being a non-scientist, I had to engage the help of a friend of mine who was an IIT engineer to sort of, sit with me on multiple occasions to do that. So it was a terrific experience writing it, and I think it's probably my most profound writing till date, but underappreciated.
I personally enjoyed the book, and I can see elements of where you borrowed Tower Physics and the meeting points of Eastern spirituality and Western science.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I keep saying that pseudoscience sometimes is just a science that has not been proven as yet.
Exactly.
And therefore, people are quick to dismiss it, just like they were quick to dismiss Ayurveda.
Or they were quick to dismiss Galileo.
Galileo, correct.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, I agree with you. There's a lot and it brings me back to that stuff, which is the idea that my wisdom lies in knowing that I don't know
enough. Yes, absolutely. And that is the fundamental truth by which one must lead their life per se. Yeah. But India, when I say the word India, what comes to mind? India or Bharat?
Yeah, so honestly, the word Bharat resonates. And for me, Bharat does not resonate as a geography. It resonates as a melting pot of ideas. And some of those ideas may have taken root here, or some of those ideas may have even spread beyond the borders of Bharat. So, for example, for me, the notion that I can visit the Shaolin monastery and see a statue of Bodhidharma, and under it is a plaque which says that this was a king, a Brahmin prince who came from India in order to teach at Shaolin. So for me, the idea that there was a Pallava prince who traveled through Cambodia and took Kalari Payattu and Silambam added on his own yogic breathing and Zen meditation, and it eventually contributed to the evolution of martial arts as we know it today. For me, that is Bharat. Or the fact that your largest Vishnu temple in the world is not here but in Angkor Wat. That for me is Bharat. Or the idea that you had a group of people who, the two groups of warring tribes, the Hittites and the Mitanni, and in what is present day Syria and Turkey. And then they are signing a peace accord in which they are invoking Indra and Varun and Mitra. And that fascinates me as Bharat. Or the fact that Darius calls himself Kshatriya in Kshetre, meaning Shehenshah, what the word? The Kshatriya of Kshatriyas. In his plaque, that tells me, so where does that word Shehenshah come from? That's where it comes from. Or, for example, the idea that you have a figure within our Mahabharat who is Draupadi, not Draupadi, Gandhari. And then you have Afghanistan, modern day Afghanistan, and then you have the playing out of war in Kandahar. And then you realize that, oh my God, this was the same region. And we refer to her so casually as Gandhari. But the fact that this was very much part of the entire civilization that we are talking about. For me, it's all about finding those sort of those connections. When I was writing Magicians of Mazda, the fact that the word Iran comes from Aryanem Vaija, or the land of the Aryans, or the fact that when you put the Gathas together and you put the Rig Ved, or in fact, more particularly the Atharva Ved, you find so many overlaps between the two. Or the fact that you right now you have the Strait of Hormuz being discussed every day.
Correct.
But where does that Strait of Hormuz get its name from? From Hormuz. Hormuz meaning a short form for Ahura Mazda. And where does that Ahura Mazda come from? Well, Ahura Mazda, again, there's a long logical, etymological explanation of sorts. Because Ahura Mazda actually is another flip term for Varuna. And the fact that Varuna has a great friend, and that's why he begins to be called Mitra. And Mitra is eventually adopted by the Romans, which results in the cults of Mitra. Or the fact that you have the star in the sky, which we call the twin stars of Yama and Yamini. And that gets adopted by the Greeks as Gemini. For me, all of this is Bharat.
You've beautifully expounded what Bharat stands for, the civilization that that combines cultures across the world, and perhaps is the unifying thought in a way, that everywhere that you see, you can find Bharat, and Bharat is also within you in a
Absolutely.
way.
And of course, mind you, there are people who look at my exposition that I just gave and will say that Ashwin Sanghi has lived up to his name, Sanghi. But again, it brings us back to that same view that by saying that there were some things which were very, very meaningful in our civilization doesn't imply that I disregard
the other.
Correct. That what happened elsewhere that was of meaning. Isn't it possible to entertain both those ideas simultaneously in my head?
And if that is the definition of a Sanghi, then I think all of us are one. And if that isn't, then none of us are. But on that note, the final word, when I say IIMUN, or India's International Movement to Unite Nations, this is another extension of leadership development that we're trying to do. What is your first thought when somebody says, I'm onto you?
Rishabh,
That's very kind.
no, but it's genuinely true. You've poured your blood and sweat and time and effort and energy into this organization, and I've seen the way it has grown over the years. I've seen you from the time that you were a fledgling nascent organization to today, where I can truly say that I'm so proud of you and what the organization stands for, and the number of children that you have impacted, and the number of youngsters who have suddenly been given a platform on account of you. So I know this may sound at times almost a little too simplistic. That what do you think of when I mention the organization? Frankly, you are the face, and but I know that there is a huge
There's a-
network
correct.
behind you. It's like me saying that I'm this great writer, but I forget everything around me. No, but I think, touch wood, you've managed to keep your feet on the ground,
Thank you.
and you built up a great team around you. I think probably today when I'm sitting with you, I must have in the last 15 years had conversations with you at least 10 times.
Easily.
Either in real world events or in virtual events of this nature.
Correct.
What is really heartening is the fact that there is, I remember I was at another book event and a young man came up to me and he said that, sir, would you sign my book? So I signed it for him. Then he said, may I have a selfie? And then he showed me a selfie of himself with me at that very first event that we did some
Wow.
10 or 12 years ago,
Wow. At retreat.
when he was just a kid.
Wow.
So, so
That's very
that tells me we don't realize the sort of impact that we are having on young minds. And I
Right.
hope that whether it is you, whether it's me, whether it's the entire organization, I hope that we are in some ways contributing a little bit towards nurturing, and more importantly, rather than filling them with ideas and facts and narratives, I hope that we are exposing them to the idea that they don't know much and that they need to continuously keep exploring.
And how to fill the gaps.
And how to fill the gaps.
as Dan Brown was.
That's right.
But on that note, you've been far too kind, both today and over the last decade and a half. Whenever we've requested you, you've come and you've interacted with young people. And it is one of my greatest treasures to be able to call you friend and part of the I Am On
Oh,
family.
absolutely. Absolutely. I'm equally gratified to know you, Rishabh. And all that I can wish for is that this organization continues to grow from strength to strength. And I hope that this team continues to do its wonderful work. And I'm sure that there must be so many kids that you could reach out to now who are young men.
Yes, there.
And they would tell you that probably, 10 years ago or 8 years ago, there was something that happened at an event which was created by you, which suddenly caused a batti on moment.
It is a very satisfying thing now. It's like a glorified school teacher, and the idea that where children are coming and then we're trying to create some sort of an impact. But I keep saying that we can't be counted as school teachers, but only the conduit, which is the school, because we're very lucky to have people like you and others who are a part of the family, who are the school teachers who regularly come and teach. So I'm very grateful for all that you do, for your time today, and for weaving that beautiful web of Bharat that he did, and then entrapping us in a way to want to know more. And then always majority of his books, like he said, have those the index at the end, the places where you can go and get more information from, the resources at the very end, which then get you to think more about Bharat slightly more deeply as well. So for all that you do and for being the wonderful kahanikar that you are, thank you, Ashwin.
Thank you, Rishabh. Thank you. God bless.